Good morning. All right, I'm Mr. Robinson here with some American history. So I hope you're excited because I am too. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get into this now. Look, we're starting a new a new unit here. All right, the progressive unit. Okay, so I'm going to explain that. I'm going to go through some of the slides again and explain exactly what's going on. Now, the progressive unit, okay, when you think of the progressive era, think of it as a reaction to the Gilded Age. All right. So the Gilded Age is where there's some corruption and things are going on. A lot of people are becoming very rich. The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, they're becoming very rich, but a lot of these immigrants and factory workers are suffering. All right. So the progressive era is a kind of a reaction to that, and that it's trying to change and kind of right some of these wrongs that are going on in society right here around the 1910s, 1920s, all right? Even before that, some. So the first thing we're going to study is some of the racial inequality or racial problems that were going on around this time, and particularly two leaders, all right? They both had differing viewpoints on uh, how to achieve civil rights for African Americans. So this is a little bit of civil rights, but now later in the unit, or later in this course, we will study a whole unit of civil rights, particularly in the 1960s with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and some other leaders, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, those type people. But we're going to get into it here around the turn of the century with these two guys, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. All right. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, if you don't remember from American History 1, which I also teach, some of you, I think I taught you guys, those are basically the Reconstruction Amendments, or those amendments that were passed right after the Civil War. All right. 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. 14th Amendment guaranteed equal protection. In other words, it didn't matter if you were black, white, male, female, or not, everyone has equal protection under the law. And then the 15th Amendment guaranteed African American males the right to vote in theory. But now, look, we're going to look at there's certain states did things to disenfranchise or keep African Americans from voting. So that's what we're getting into right now. The evolution of Jim Crow South. These are what's known as Jim Crow laws. You have a grandfather clause, which basically said that you could vote, but only if your grandfather could vote. Well, a lot of these African Americans at this time, their grandfather couldn't vote. Why? Because their grandfather was a slave. So that was designed to keep them from voting. A poll tax. All right, we know that voting is a right as an American citizen. Well, poll tax basically said that you had to pay to vote. You got to go and you got to pay a tax to vote. Well, a lot of African Americans were very poor and wanted to hold on, as well as white folks were too in the South. But all these are designed in the South. Okay, a lot of white folks too were very poor, so they're not going to pay to vote. All right, and what that does is the effect it has is only the rich people are voting. All right, so they're the ones that are maintaining power. A literacy test. So a literacy test was it was a test that you had to pass in order to vote. Well, the problem was a lot of times the test was abnormally hard for African Americans. And again, this is unconstitutional. The fact that you would have to take a test to vote. All right, as an American citizen, we all have a right to vote, provided we're not a felon. So literacy tests, a lot of times African Americans would have to take this test, and the questions, were extremely hard. So, for instance, name every senator in the United States. Well, I can't do that. I guarantee you, probably not every. I doubt any other history teacher at the school can name every single senator in the United States Senate. There's 100 of them. All right. So these, and sometimes these literacy tests were given to African Americans in a foreign language. All right. So they're designed to make African Americans fail them so they cannot vote. And then intimidation and fear as well. All right. So these are just things that segregation in the South. All right. Segregation in all these things. Very even at drinking fountains. There's segregation going on, libraries, schools, all that. Not going to get into that as much anymore, as much because we'll study it later in the civil rights era. This is important, though. This is going to be on the test. So there was a Supreme Court case you may know from civics and economics, which I also teach. The Homer Plessy, a guy, he's 1/8 African American, 1/8 black. He tried to sit in the white section of the train. All right, in Louisiana, and basically they said that he couldn't do it, all right, because there was a law, and remember these Jim Crow laws in the South were for segregation. They basically said, look, you can't sit in this area, even though he's mostly white, but they wouldn't let him. And the Supreme Court upheld the decision. This is important, all right? This is kind of a black mark on the Supreme Court. They said that it's separate but equal, all right? Separate. The fact that you can have segregation, they said that was constitutional. That was okay. All right, but here's the thing. Here's the problem. Separate is inherently not equal. All right, if you keep some people separate or anything separate, that's not equal. Okay, so it's kind of a black mark on the Supreme Court. But that's what the Supreme Court said. So they upheld this policy of segregation. This is in 1896 now. All right, so really it's not going to be until Brown versus Board in 1954 where that policy is overturned. So Plessy versus Ferguson upheld segregation and kept those segregational policies going. There it is. Well, sorry. I don't know why it keeps doing that. All right, so here's the guy we're going to look at. These two guys, Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington. So he advocated for a policy of compromise between African Americans and whites. He advocated to know that. All right, he didn't directly demand equality as the other guy we're going to look at did. He felt that black people need to pull his words, in quotations, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Okay, we need to work and get to gain this equality. All right, and this economic security. If we enhance ourselves through our own businesses and our own propositions of work, if we enhance ourselves, then we will eventually become to be viewed as equal with whites. That's his policy. We have to earn it. All right. Now here's some things. So he advocated for vocational training. Well, what is vocational training? So it's things like carpentry, all right, agriculture, mechanics, all right, these type of things where black people could start their own businesses using this training. That's what he pushed for. Again, a policy of compromise. He's asking white people to give jobs and opportunities to black people. All right. So a lot of white leaders favored him because, again, it was a huge change at that time to give African Americans equality in certain spots of the country. So the fact that he wasn't outright demanding this from white society, it kind of ingratiated him with a lot of white leaders at the time. Again, he's important. He goes to the White House and visits the White House. Now, we're going to look at some of the background on him. Okay, well, again, he says he was unpopular with many black leaders, emphasized jobs and trainings for blacks. Okay, here's some background. This is what makes him different than than W.B. Du Bois. All right, he's born a slave, or was born a slave in Virginia, believing in gradual equality. Now, some African Americans accused him. There's a bad term right there that they accused him of as being what's called an Uncle Tom. All right, and he got a lot of support from whites. Now, the fact that he was born a slave is important because what type of work did most slaves do? Well, they did vocational type of work, meaning they did things such as field work and agriculture, carpentry, those things. So that's where he saw. That's where his background was in. Okay. He founded a college called Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. He attended Hampton University, or it was Hampton Institute then, and that's where he went to college. Okay, so those are some things about Booker T. Now that's a picture of the type of work he pushed for. Look what looks like they're doing some carpentry type work. There's some work in agriculture. Now W.E.B. Du Bois is different. So he strongly opposed Washington's tolerance of segregation, but W.B. Du Bois demanded equality, right? Different than Booker T is that he outright demanded it. Okay, and that's what it says there. So he also felt that African Americans should pursue a liberal arts or classical education, meaning that is different than vocational training. Liberal arts are well, that's what your class is in right now. All right, history, okay, or science, or reading. Those type of things are what liberal arts are. It's different than vocational training. So he helped found the NAACP, all right, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He helped found that. All right, he led something called the Niagara Movement, which in turn founded that. So his background is different. Now he's born free in Massachusetts. He became the first African American to receive a PhD from Harvard University. Different than Booker T's background, whereas he went to Hampton Institute and received vocational training there. W.B. Du Bois receives a classical liberal arts education from Harvard, and he demanded equality. Okay, these are some things he did. He wrote "The Souls of Black Folk." I read that in college. It's a good book. And then the Niagara Movement, which led to the founding of the NAACP. So this is some example of the type of training W.E.B. Du Bois pushed for. Okay, right? They're studying. They got their books out. All right, here they're learning. There's like some chemistry is going on. So there's some differences between Du Bois and Booker T. Okay, so that's what the assignment's going to be on. I'll put it online with instructions for you to do that. Remember, all the assignments are going to be due on Sundays from now on, okay? But I'm going to post them throughout the week. Just because they're due on Sunday, I would not suggest waiting till Sunday to do this. All right? I'm just giving you that extra time in case something is to arise and you can't get it done. All right? So I'm going to post them in order of how I would do them if I were you, in order to effectively learn the material. Okay, so please, if you have any questions, let me know.